Welcome to CEO Insights. I'm Marilyn de Guzman with investingnews.com. I'm speaking with Brooke Clements, President and CEO of North Shore Uranium. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you, Marilyn. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. So let's talk about the most recent announcement you made about the execution of a binding term sheet for an option on the Rio Puerco uranium project in New Mexico. Can you provide some highlights of the transaction and why this acquisition matters for the company and its shareholders?
Sure. Rio Puerco is located in the Grants Uranium District in northwestern New Mexico, about 50 kilometers northwest of Albuquerque. The Grants District is the most prolific producer of uranium in the United States. It produced over 340 million pounds of U3O8 between 1950 and 2002. And our Rio Puerco project holds a significant historical uranium resource of 6 million tons at a grade of 0.09% U3O8 for a total of about 11.4 million pounds of U3O8. There has been no significant work done on the project since the 1970s. We see this as an excellent opportunity to acquire a historic resource, validate it to modern standards, assess whether it is amenable to in situ recovery or ISR extraction, and then ultimately assess the economic viability of the resource. And before I go on, I just want to make it clear that the historical resource at Rio Puerco is not current and not to Canadian NI 43101 standards. It has not been verified by a qualified person on our behalf. Now, the transaction. We plan to meet conditions by August 31st that will allow us to complete a transaction that will give us an option to earn up to an 87.5% interest in the Rio Puerco project from Resurrection Mining, who's a private U.S. company. To earn that 87.5% interest requires approximately 4.8 million Canadian in total compensation over a 5-year term. Of that 4.8 million, 3.25 million are exploration expenditures. Rio Puerco will give us an instant, cost-effective exposure to a uranium resource. We think the transaction is good value for the number of pounds of uranium in the ground. And with Rio Puerco, we now have exposure to uranium projects in two highly prospective jurisdictions, Grants in New Mexico and the Athabasca Basin in Saskatchewan. And this is all at a time when the nuclear sector is heating up and more people are watching it.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit. So speaking of uranium in the U.S., the U.S. is, as you know, it has some U.S. Uranium production, but it currently relies heavily on imports for its nuclear energy needs. The U.S. government, has recently made some pronouncement to stimulate development of more nuclear energy capacity, and increase domestic production. Do you think this support can have a significant impact on shoring up domestic uranium production? And how does it help projects like the Rio Puerco?
Yeah, I do. In 2024, the U.S. produced only 670,000 pounds of U3O8 concentrate. That's less than 2% of their needs for domestic nuclear power plants. Virtually all U.S. uranium is imported, with about a quarter of that coming from Canada. And with recent commitments by the U.S. to triple nuclear power generation capacity by 2050, there's really a big push to stimulate domestic production of uranium. And as most people know, on May 23rd of this year, President Trump issued 4 executive orders aimed at reinvigorating the U.S. nuclear energy sector. And one important pillar of those executive orders was to maximize domestic production of uranium, which is specifically domestic mining and enrichment. And there's a commitment to streamline the regulatory process for permitting projects, which, should make it quicker and more efficient for companies like us with projects on public land to permit projects. And there's already one example of expedited permitting, Anfield's Velvet Wood Uranium Vanadium project in Utah recently was given federal approval. So there are living examples. We think it should streamline things.
Yeah, that's certainly going in the right direction. You've mentioned earlier some of the resource for the Rio Puerco. Aside from the stuff that you've already mentioned, what makes it really a compelling project for your company?
Well, really, the main thing is something I've mentioned. It's a great opportunity to upgrade a significant resource to modern standards and assess economic viability on a project that's really had no significant work since the 1970s. It was discovered in 1968, and in the 1970s, Kerr-McGee, who was a big uranium company at the time, drilled over 1,000 holes. They defined a resource which they classified as a reserve, and they began developing an underground uranium mine. They had plans for a 500 ton per day mine, but stopped developing it after a trial mining phase in 1979 when the price of uranium dropped dramatically. Okay, there was virtually no significant work in the Rio Puerco area except for 4 exploration holes and a few studies until the mid-2000s when it was acquired by an Australian company. That Australian company took the Kerr-McGee data generated in the 70s, and they defined a historical uranium resource of 11.4 million pounds of U3O8 at a depth of about 250 meters. And the company had ambitious plans to go do a lot of drilling, expand the resource, confirm everything. But the downturn in the uranium market that started in 2008 really led to them to cease work and not ever even mounting a drill program. So the project has been sitting there ever since the late 2000s, waiting for us. And, the historical resource is on only one portion of the claim block, and there's a potential to expand that resource. And our goal is to validate and upgrade the historical resource to 43101 compliance status through drilling and geologic modeling. And there are some characteristics of the mineralized zones that suggest that it could be amenable to ISR extraction. And again, ISR can be much more cost effective than conventional underground mining.
And aside from the Rio Puerco, you also have your existing projects in the Athabasca Basin. Maybe it's a good time for our investors to know more about that. Could you give an overview of your projects in the Athabasca Basin?
Sure. With Canada's only 2 producing uranium mines and several development stage projects, the Athabasca Basin is the most prolific uranium exploration jurisdiction in the world. Almost the whole thing's staked and people are drilling everywhere. The government is very supportive of the uranium industry, and Saskatchewan is a fantastic example of successful collaboration between the uranium exploration and mining industry and local communities. Really great examples of that. We have 2 projects at the eastern margin of the Athabasca Basin. The 4,500 hectare West Bear project, which is a partnership with Gem Oil, and our lead project, Falcon, which is a partnership with Sky Harbor Resources. Falcon is 55,000 hectares in size, and it's 30 kilometers east of the former Key Lake uranium mine and currently active Key Lake uranium mill. The mill actually processes ore from the McArthur River mine. Using high-quality electromagnetic and magnetic data that was generated in the mid-2000s and data from airborne gravity surveys that we flew in 2022, we've defined 36 uranium targets at Falcon. And our priority is to evaluate targets that have never seen drilling before. About half of the property through 2008 had been evaluated by drilling. But again, with the downturn in the uranium price in late 2000, the drilling stopped. So we're working on the south half of the property where there's been no drilling. And in 2004, at the first 2 holes we drilled, P3 and P8, we hit near surface uranium mineralization with multiple samples that ran over 300 ppm U3O8, which is pretty good for an initial drill program. These 2 newly defined mineralized sites help us define what we believe is a new potential mineralized corridor. And our focus now is drilling new targets along that corridor. And we are hoping to drill at least 5 in our next drill program. We have a drill permit that is valid till 2027 at Falcon. We have an exploration agreement with the English River First Nation, and we have a great partner in Sky Harbor Resources who really provides a lot of very valuable technical guidance.
Is the plan then to advance all your projects, both in Rio Puerco and the Falcon projects simultaneously?
Yes, it is. We think it's great to have exposure to 2 projects in 2 great jurisdictions, but different jurisdictions, and the projects have quite different characteristics. At Rio Puerco, there is a known resource, and our job there is to validate the resource, attempt to grow it, and ultimately prove up economic viability. In the Athabasca Basin, we're looking for an exploration home run, one drill hole that could represent the beginning of a major new discovery. We are working to drill high-quality targets that have never been drilled before in a zone that has proven uranium and favorable alteration. So the home run is what we're looking for in the Athabasca.
So what, for the rest, looking for the rest of the year, 2025, what are some of the near-term milestones, upcoming catalysts that investors can expect from the company?
Yeah, before August 31st at Rio Puerco, we're going to meet the conditions that will allow us to complete a transaction and begin earning into the project. When we get to work, we're going to start using the existing drill data that defines the mineralized zones and build 3D models of the deposit. We'll use those 3D models to plan our first drill program, which will be aimed at validating this historical data. We will also start assessing the amenability of the deposit to ISR extraction. And at Falcon, as we speak, we are preparing to mount a prospecting program later this summer that will set the table for a drill program where we hope to drill at least 5 targets.
So with all these, having said, made your case about your projects, can you articulate what makes North Shore Uranium a good investment opportunity?
Yeah, with the world waking up to the benefits of nuclear energy and a projected supply-demand imbalance that is imminent, the world needs to prove up more uranium resources and make more uranium discoveries. It looks to me like a uranium bull market era is coming, and that will be good for uranium explorers like us. And our exposure to 2 world-class uranium districts offers us great opportunities. We have a real solid plan on how to add value for shareholders at those 2 projects. And we have a great team. I've spent most of the last 25 years working on exploration programs in northern Canada, mostly in jurisdictions like Saskatchewan. Blake Steele is an advisor and founding investor, and he has deep ISR experience. He was a CEO of a company, Azarga Resources, that was sold to Encore Energy in 2022 for its U.S. ISR assets. Alex Molyneux is a supportive founding investor, and one director, Jimmy Tom, was the former exploration manager for Paladin Energy, and he has deep uranium expertise. And Alex Molyneux was the former CEO of Paladin Energy. So, and finally, I believe, at a market cap of just under $2 million, we are undervalued and we represent good exposure to the uranium sector relative to our peers, given our quality projects. And we plan to be very busy, so stay tuned, please.
Well, there you have it. Brooke Clements from North Shore Uranium, thanks again for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you, Marilyn.
And for our investors watching, give us a comment. What do you think? Is this now the right time to invest in uranium? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And thanks again for watching, and join us again next time for another edition of CEO Insights.